Red and blue lights carved through the sheets of midnight rain like a blade, a harsh promise of authority on the lonely highway. But the 24-year-old rookie behind the wheel of the Ford Police Interceptor had no idea he had just stopped the wrong car. The one man whose quiet dignity would expose the rot beneath a badge and shatter the illusion of unchecked power. Handcuffs would click, threats would fly, constitutional rights would be ground into the wet asphalt under a storm that seemed to mourn what was coming. By sunrise, that single catastrophic mistake would ignite a federal civil rights investigation, torch a police department's reputation, and force a historic $2.8 million settlement. This is what happens when raw arrogance collides with the full weight of the United States Constitution. The dashboard clock glowed 11:47 p.m. on a cold November night. Outside, rain hammered the asphalt of Illinois Route 22, a quiet, winding two-lane that skirted the wealthy edges of Lake Forest in Lake County, Illinois. Inside the cruiser, the heater droned its steady complaint against the damp, punctuated only by the crackle of the police radio. Behind the wheel sat Officer Justin M. Riley. At 24, Riley was 6 weeks out of the academy, his high and tight haircut still razor-sharp, his uniform creased so precisely it could have drawn blood. He carried himself like a man who believed the thin blue line ran through his veins alone. 3 weeks on solo patrol had only sharpened his hunger. In his mind, he was not merely enforcing the law. He was the law, the last barrier between order and chaos on these dark roads. His training officers had hammered command presence into him until it became gospel. Dominate the scene, control the narrative, never let a citizen push back. Riley had absorbed the lesson, but missed the distinction between respect and submission. He drummed his fingers on the steering wheel, eyes scanning the sparse traffic through the rain-streaked windshield. He was hunting. A solid DUI, a warrant pop, a trunk full of something illegal, anything that would let him walk into roll call with a story the veterans would respect, something to prove the rookie belonged in the predator's seat. 2 miles ahead, driving toward him in the opposite lane, glided a pristine 2021 Mercedes-Benz E-Class, dark navy under the streetlights. Behind the wheel was Leonard P. Hargrove, 58 years old, a man whose life had been spent inside the machinery of American justice. Appointed by the President and confirmed by the Senate to a lifetime seat on the United States District Court for the Northern District of Illinois, Judge Hargrove had once been a relentless civil rights lawyer and, before that, a federal prosecutor. He knew the Constitution not as lofty words on paper, but as the living tissue that kept a fractured nation from coming apart. Tonight he was simply a tired man trying to get home. 14 hours in his chambers reviewing a 1,000-page docket for a complex corporate fraud trial had left his eyes burning behind wire-rimmed glasses. He had loosened his silk tie, turned the classical station up a notch, and allowed himself the small mercy of imagining Sarah's face when he finally walked through the door. A warm cup of decaf, the quiet of their house. That was all he wanted. As the Mercedes followed the gentle curve of Illinois Route 22, the right front tire kissed the edge of a deep, water-filled pothole that had been eating the shoulder for weeks. The car hydroplaned for less than a heartbeat. The steering wheel tugged once in Hargrove's hands. He corrected smoothly, bringing the sedan back to the center of his lane with the calm precision of a man who had driven this road for 20 years. The entire correction took less than 2 seconds. Textbook, safe, experienced. But to Officer Justin M. Riley, parked 50 yards ahead in the shadowed lot of an abandoned Sonoco station, it looked like something else entirely. Through the rain, he saw the Mercedes headlights dip toward the shoulder, the right front tire crossing the solid white fog line by perhaps 2 inches before correcting. To Riley, that was not a driver avoiding a hazard. That was reasonable suspicion. That was probable cause for a DUI stop. That was the break he had been waiting for all shift. Adrenaline flooded his chest. He slammed the Interceptor into gear, tire spinning on the wet pavement as he surged out of the lot. The V6 roared, closing the distance fast. Inside the Mercedes, Judge Hargrove glanced at the rear-view mirror and saw headlights approaching hard and fast. He held his speed at 45, expecting the police car to pass on the left the way local units often did on this stretch. Instead, the cruiser locked onto his rear bumper, so close Hargrove could see the silhouette of the light bar on the roof. "What in the world?" he muttered, brow furrowing. He tapped his brakes once, a polite suggestion that the driver behind him back off. That single, gentle tap was all Riley needed. In the rookie's mind, it was furtive, guilty behavior. He reached down and flipped the toggle. The night exploded in red and blue. Strobes ricocheted off the wet trees and road signs, flooding the Mercedes interior with frantic color. The siren gave a short, aggressive whoop-whoop that cut through the rain. Judge Hargrove did exactly what the law and his decades of experience required. He activated his right turn signal, eased onto the wide gravel shoulder, and came to a complete stop beneath a flickering streetlight. He shifted into park, killed the engine and the radio, and placed both hands at 10 and 2 on the wheel. Visible, still, compliant. Behind him, Riley angled his cruiser in a deliberate tactical offset, boxing the Mercedes in. He threw the Interceptor into park, heart hammering against his ribs. He unsnapped the retention strap on his level 3 holster and rested his palm on the grip of his Glock 19. The dash camera mounted on the windshield began recording in silence, capturing what would become the most expensive and damning piece of footage in the history of the Lake Forest Police Department. Rain drummed harder on the Mercedes roof. Hargrove watched the mirror as the officer emerged, backlit by the cruiser's takedown lights, a harsh white glare that turned the rain into needles of silver. Riley did not walk. He advanced with the stiff, bladed posture of a man who had been taught to treat every stop like a potential gunfight. His right hand hovered near his weapon. In his left, he carried a heavy aluminum flashlight raised high. As he reached the trunk, he slammed his palm down hard, the metallic thud echoing like a challenge. The judge flinched at the sound. Riley moved to the driver's door, positioning himself behind the B-pillar so Hargrove had to twist awkwardly to see him. He aimed the 300 lumen beam straight into the side mirror, reflecting it directly into the judge's eyes. Hargrove squinted, pain blooming behind his glasses, and lowered the window. Cold November air and rain rushed in. "License, registration, and proof of insurance. Right now," Riley barked. No greeting, no explanation, just volume and command. Hargrove kept his right hand on the wheel and raised his left to shield his eyes. "Officer, would you mind lowering the flashlight a moment? It's shining straight into my eyes." "I said license, registration, and insurance. Do not give me orders," Riley snapped, stepping closer, rain streaming off the brim of his hat. Hargrove's voice remained level, the same measured tone he used to quiet a chaotic courtroom. "My hands are on the steering wheel, officer. My wallet is in my back right pocket. My registration and insurance are in the glove compartment. I am going to reach for my wallet now. Is that acceptable?" Riley's jaw tightened. He hated the calm, hated that this black man in a luxury car in a wealthy white suburb spoke with an educated authority that made the rookie feel small and exposed. The subconscious bias he had never examined flared hot. "Get the wallet, slowly," Hargrove complied, retrieving the leather billfold and handing over his driver's license. Riley snatched it, keeping the light pinned on the judge's face. "Leonard P. Hargrove, where are you coming from tonight?" He used the first name deliberately, a dominance play. Hargrove's jaw flexed once, but his voice did not waver. "I am coming from my office in Chicago, officer. I would prefer to be addressed as Mr. Hargrove or sir. May I ask why I was stopped?" The rookie scoffed. "You don't get to ask the questions here, Arthur. I ask the questions. You were swerving all over the road, crossed the fog line. Have you been drinking?" "I have not had a drink in 20 years, officer, and I did not swerve. I avoided a deep pothole on the shoulder. I maintained complete control of my vehicle." "That's your story," Riley sneered. "Get the registration, now." Hargrove leaned across, opened the glove compartment, and passed over the leather folio. Riley took the documents and stepped back. "Hands on the wheel, do not move." He walked backward to his cruiser, eyes never leaving the Mercedes, then slid inside and ran the information. The return came clean. Valid license, no warrants, registered owner, no criminal history. Riley stared at the glowing screen, ego stinging. The driver had not been intimidated. He had spoken back. He had demanded basic respect. In that fatal moment, Riley decided Leonard P. Hargrove needed a lesson in who held the power on this roadside. He would write the citation for failure to maintain lane and make the process as slow and humiliating as the law allowed. He stepped back into the rain and marched to the Mercedes, this time planting himself squarely in the open window, leaning in. "All right, Arthur, here's what's going to happen. You're getting a citation for failure to maintain a lane. But because you've been uncooperative and combative, I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle." Hargrove regarded him steadily. He knew Pennsylvania versus Mims permitted an officer to order a driver out during a lawful stop for safety reasons. But he also knew this stop was pretextual, and the order to exit was entirely punitive. "Officer," he said, voice dropping into the register that had once silenced opposing counsel, "I have provided every document you requested. I have answered every question. I am not combative. I am sitting with my hands on the wheel. There is no lawful reason for me to stand in the pouring rain. I am requesting that you call a field supervisor to this location immediately." "I am the only supervisor you need to worry about tonight," Riley spat. "Open the door or I will drag you out and charge you with resisting arrest." Hargrove saw the tremor in the young man's hand near the holster. He had presided over too many excessive force cases to ignore the danger. Arguing constitutional law on a dark highway with an armed, adrenalized rookie was a fool's errand. The courtroom was the proper battlefield. "I will comply with your order to exit the vehicle," he said clearly, loud enough for the body mic to capture every word. "But I want the record to reflect that I do so under duress and that I have formally requested a supervisor." Riley yanked the door open. Hargrove swung his legs out. His aging knees popped in quiet protest. He rose slowly, standing 4 inches taller than the officer, even in the chaotic strobe. The tailored charcoal suit and silk tie were instantly soaked, yet he stood unbowed, imposing in his stillness. Riley took an involuntary step back, then compensated with fresh aggression. "Turn around! Face the car! Hands on the roof!" Hargrove paused. Ordering him out was one thing. demanding a frisk position without reasonable suspicion that he was armed and dangerous, violated Terry versus Ohio. Officer, you have no legal basis to search my person. I have committed no crime. I am not armed. I am a United States District Judge. Turn around or I will tase you, Riley roared, ripping the yellow X-26 from its holster. Two red laser dots appeared on Hargrove's wet suit jacket, centered on his chest. The judge looked at the dots, then into Riley's wide, wild eyes, and understood the young man had left procedure behind. One wrong move, one twitch, and 50,000 volts would drop a 58-year-old man onto wet pavement, risking cardiac arrest or a fatal head injury. Wisdom prevailed over pride. Hargrove turned, placed his palms flat against the cold, rain-slicked roof of his own Mercedes. "Spread your legs!" Riley delivered a hard, unnecessary kick to the inside of Hargrove's right ankle, forcing the older man's stance wide. Hargrove winced but made no sound. Riley holstered the taser and patted him down roughly, sides, waist, legs, finding only a cell phone and keys. "Hands behind your back. Officer, are you placing me under arrest for a traffic infraction?" "I am detaining you for my safety because you refuse to follow instructions," Riley lied for the camera. He grabbed Hargrove's right wrist and violently wrenched it upward behind the judge's back. Hargrove gasped at the sharp, tearing pain through his rotator cuff. Riley snapped the Smith & Wesson cuffs on, then seized the left arm and yanked it back to meet the right. The steel bit deep, instantly cutting off circulation and numbing the judge's fingers. "Officer, these cuffs are too tight. I'm losing feeling in my hands." "They're not supposed to be comfortable, Arthur," Riley hissed in his ear. He grabbed the chain and frog-marched the federal judge through the rain to the rear of the police cruiser. He opened the back door and shoved. Hargrove, hands pinned, could not brace himself. He fell awkwardly onto the hard plastic seat, his head striking the plexiglass partition with a dull thud. Riley slammed the door, locking the judge inside the stale, rain-smelling cage. Standing victorious in the downpour, Riley felt the rush of total dominance. But he was not finished. He wanted to find something, anything, to justify this massive overreaction. He wanted drugs, an open container, anything to validate the search. Without consent, without a warrant, without any recognized exception to the Fourth Amendment, he walked back to the Mercedes, opened the driver's door, and began tearing through it. He rifled the center console, flung visors down, swept the flashlight under the seats. Then his beam landed on a monogrammed leather briefcase on the passenger floorboard. Riley hauled the heavy briefcase onto the seat and popped the brass latches. Inside lay neat stacks of red-bound legal documents. Beneath them was a heavy black garment. He pulled it free, a long, flowing black robe. "What the hell is this? A choir gown," he muttered. He dug deeper and found a second wallet, heavier than the first. When he flipped it open, the flashlight illuminated a solid gold federal judicial badge and an identification card bearing the seal of the United States of America. United States District Court, Northern District of Illinois. Leonard P. Hargrove, United States District Judge. The blood drained from Riley's face. His swagger collapsed into cold, gut-twisting terror. He had pretextually stopped, illegally searched, physically assaulted, and unlawfully detained a sitting federal judge. Every word, every shove, every violation had been recorded by his own dash camera and body mic. He turned slowly and looked through the rain-streaked rear window of the cruiser. Judge Hargrove sat perfectly still in the back seat, eyes fixed on him through the plexiglass. waiting with the patience of a man who understood that the Constitution was about to answer for him. Riley's hands shook so violently he nearly dropped the badge into the flooded footwell. He shoved it back into the wallet, dropped the briefcase, and stumbled toward his cruiser, boots splashing in the puddles. He could not use the main channel. He switched to the encrypted tactical frequency reserved for supervisors. Unit 4 to Sergeant Donovan. I need you at my 20 immediately. Illinois Route 22, westbound past the old Sonico station. Code 3, please. A few seconds of static, then the gravel voice of Sergeant Michael T. Donovan, a 20-year veteran with a salt and pepper mustache and zero patience for rookie mistakes, crackled back. Unit 4, state your emergency. Are you under fire? No backup, Sarge. Just you. Please, Code 3. Riley's Explorer arrived 4 minutes later in a spray of gravel and water. He stepped out into the rain. Talk to me, Riley. What the hell is going on? Riley's command presence had evaporated. Sarge, I messed up. I pulled him over for crossing the fog line. He got mouthy. I ordered him out, cuffed him, put him in the back. Then I searched the car. Riley stopped cold. You searched the car? Did he consent? Did you smell weed? See a weapon? Inventory for tow? Riley shook his head. Donovan unleashed a stream of profanity under his breath. So you committed an illegal search on a clean traffic stop. Who is he? His name is Leonard P. Hargrove. His ID is on the passenger seat in his briefcase. Riley marched to the Mercedes, opened the passenger door, and flipped open the wallet. The veteran sergeant stared at the gold badge. The words, United States District Judge, burned into his retinas. Riley had arrested mayors, city councilmen, and wealthy CEOs. But a federal judge, a lifetime appointee of the United States government, was another magnitude of disaster. He slowly closed the wallet, placed it back exactly where he found it, and gently closed the car door. He walked back to Riley. If looks could kill, the rookie would have been dead on the wet gravel. Do you have any idea what you've just done? Riley hissed, voice remarkably calm but laced with absolute terror. You just kidnapped a federal judge and illegally searched his confidential judicial documents. The dash cam recorded every word. I'm sorry, Sarge. I didn't know. Shut up. Get the keys to the cuffs. We are getting him out of that car right now. Donovan grabbed Riley by the shoulder and shoved him toward the rear door of the cruiser. The sergeant yanked the door open. Judge Hargrove sat in the back, soaking wet, his hands still painfully bound behind his back. The rain blew into the cruiser, but Hargrove didn't flinch. He looked up at Riley with a cold, calculating calmness that sent a shiver down the sergeant's spine. Judge Hargrove, sir, I am Sergeant Michael T. Donovan. I am the shift supervisor. There has been a catastrophic misunderstanding here tonight. We are going to take these handcuffs off you right now, sir. Do not touch me, Sergeant, Hargrove's voice boomed from the back seat, cutting through the sound of the storm. It was not a yell. It was a command of absolute authority. Riley froze. Sir, please let us take the cuffs off. They look tight. They are exceedingly tight, Sergeant. I have lost feeling in my right hand, and I believe my rotator cuff is damaged. However, you will not remove them. Not yet. I am currently being unlawfully detained without probable cause. I want this illegal detention fully documented. You will contact your chief of police. You will wake Chief Hawthorne up. You will tell him exactly what his officer has done on a recorded dash cam, and you will instruct him to report to this location immediately. Until the chief of police arrives to officially release me and take custody of this crime scene, I am not moving, and these handcuffs are staying exactly where they are. Riley swallowed hard. The judge was not merely angry. He was building a civil rights lawsuit right there in the back of the cruiser, preserving the chain of evidence and ensuring the absolute maximum liability fell on the department's leadership. "Yes, Your Honor," Riley whispered. He closed the cruiser door and pulled his cell phone from his tactical vest. It was 12:41 a.m. He dialed the chief's personal number. Chief Richard Hawthorne was a political survivor who had navigated the treacherous waters of local government for 6 years, transforming the Lake Forest Police Department into a well-funded, highly respected agency. He was asleep in his warm bed when his phone vibrated on the nightstand. When he saw Riley's name on the caller ID at 12:41 a.m., he knew it was not good. When he heard the words "federal judge," "handcuffs," and "illegal search," his blood ran cold. 45 minutes later, a black unmarked Chevy Tahoe roared up to the scene on Illinois Route 22. The rain had finally slowed to a dismal drizzle, but the atmosphere was suffocating. 3 other cruisers had arrived to block off the road entirely, ensuring no civilian traffic drove past the embarrassing spectacle. Chief Hawthorne stepped out of his Tahoe, wearing a rain jacket thrown hastily over his pajama shirt and suit trousers. He didn't even look at Officer Riley, who was standing by the guardrail looking like a man awaiting the firing squad. Hawthorne marched straight to Riley. "Tell me this is a nightmare, Tom," Hawthorne said, his jaw clenched so tightly it ached. "It's worse, Chief," Riley replied grimly. "Dash cam was rolling the whole time. Audio captured everything. Riley went completely rogue, ordered him out for a minor traffic violation, cuffed him, tossed him in the back, then tore through his vehicle and found his federal credentials." Hawthorne closed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his nose. This was not just a lawsuit. This was the kind of event that invited the Department of Justice to launch a pattern or practice investigation into the entire precinct. "Strip Riley of his weapon and badge right now," Hawthorne ordered quietly. "Put him in the front seat of your cruiser. Tell him if he speaks a single word, I'll fire him before the sun comes up." Hawthorne took a deep breath, walked over to Riley's cruiser, and opened the rear door. Judge Leonard P. Hargrove looked at the chief. The judge's wet suit clung to his frame. His wrists, visible behind his back, were bruised and swollen purple against the silver metal. "Chief Hawthorne," Hargrove said, his voice raspy but perfectly steady, "I see you decided to join us." "Your Honor, I am profoundly and deeply sorry," Hawthorne said, his voice thick with genuine shame. "Please, sir, allow me to remove those." Hawthorne pulled a universal handcuff key from his pocket. This time, Hargrove nodded slightly. The chief reached in carefully, unlocking the rigid cuffs. As the metal fell away, Hargrove let out a sharp hiss of pain, bringing his arms forward slowly. He rubbed his bruised, indented wrists, grimacing as the blood flow returned aggressively to his hands. "I apologize for the wait, Your Honor. Sergeant Donovan informed me you refused to have them removed until I arrived," Hawthorne said, stepping back to give the judge room to exit the vehicle. Hargrove slowly stepped out of the cage, standing tall despite the agonizing stiffness in his joints. He looked the chief dead in the eye. "I waited, Chief Hawthorne, because I wanted the highest-ranking officer of this department to personally witness the immediate aftermath of a blatant, violent violation of the United States Constitution," Hargrove declared. Hawthorne swallowed hard. "Sir, I assure you, Officer Riley will face severe disciplinary action. He is a rookie. He panicked, and he—" "Do not insult my intelligence by blaming this on panic," Hargrove cut him off, his voice echoing in the damp night air. "I spent 10 years as a civil rights attorney before taking the bench. I know pretextual policing when I see it. Your officer initiated a stop based on a fabricated traffic violation. He escalated the encounter to assert dominance over a citizen who questioned his authority. He violated Terry versus Ohio by demanding a frisk without reasonable suspicion. He violated the Fourth Amendment by conducting a warrantless non-consensual search of my vehicle. And he committed battery and false imprisonment by violently applying handcuffs and locking me in a cage. Furthermore, he rifled through a briefcase containing confidential federal judicial documents regarding an active criminal docket. Documents that are now compromised because your officer decided the rules of evidence did not apply to him. Hawthorne had no defense. Every word the judge spoke was an undeniable legal fact, fully supported by the blinking red light of the dash cam still recording them. Your Honor, what can I do right now to make this right? Hargrove adjusted his wetsuit jacket, attempting to restore some semblance of his usual dignity. You can give me a ride home, Chief Hawthorne. My wife has been expecting me for 2 hours. Of course, sir, right away. We'll have a tow truck take your vehicle to your house. No, Hargrove corrected sharply. You will not tow my vehicle. My vehicle is a crime scene. You will have your crime scene investigators photograph it exactly as your officer left it. You will secure the dash cam and body cam footage and place it into an evidence locker because come Monday morning, Chief, my attorneys will be filing a Title 42, Section 1983 civil rights lawsuit against Officer Riley, you, and the city of Lake Forest. The judge turned and walked slowly toward the chief's unmarked SUV, leaving Hawthorne standing in the rain, fully realizing that his city was about to be sued for millions, and there was absolutely nothing he could do to stop it. Monday morning arrived with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. At precisely 9 a.m., the electronic docket for the United States District Court for the Northern District of Illinois registered a new civil filing. The plaintiff was Leonard P. Hargrove. The defendants were Officer Justin M. Riley, Chief Richard Hawthorne, and the City of Lake Forest. The complaint was a masterclass in constitutional litigation, drafted by David K. Reynolds, a notoriously ruthless civil rights attorney who operated out of Chicago like a shark swimming in a tank of goldfish. Within 2 hours, the lawsuit was picked up by a local beat reporter. By noon, it was national news. The city of Lake Forest, a wealthy enclave accustomed to quiet scandals buried behind closed doors, suddenly found itself in the blinding spotlight of national media. News vans swarmed the Lake Forest Police Precinct. The dash cam footage, obtained through a swift and aggressive Freedom of Information Act request, filed by a consortium of news outlets, was broadcast on every major network. The nation watched in collective horror as a 24-year-old rookie berated, assaulted, and illegally caged a sitting federal judge over a phantom traffic violation. Behind the heavy oak doors of City Hall, Mayor Gregory S. Whitman was trapped in a state of sheer panic. He had summoned Chief Hawthorne and the city's lead counsel, Amanda Jenkins, for an emergency briefing. "How does this happen, Richard?" Mayor Whitman shouted, pacing the length of his expansive office. "We spend millions on training. We have the best equipment in the state, and your guy decides to play stormtrooper with a federal judge. The optics alone are catastrophic." "He went rogue, Mr. Mayor," Hawthorne replied, his face pale, the stress of the weekend etching deep lines into his forehead. "Riley's badge and gun are in my safe. He's suspended without pay, pending termination." "Termination isn't going to save us from a multi-million-dollar judgment," Caldwell shot back. He turned to Jenkins. "Amanda, tell me we have a defense. Tell me we can invoke qualified immunity." Qualified immunity was the golden shield for law enforcement. a legal doctrine that protected police officers from personal liability unless they violated a clearly established constitutional right. It was notoriously difficult to pierce. Jenkins sighed heavily, dropping a thick file onto the mayor's desk. Under normal circumstances, Mayor, we would file a motion to dismiss based on qualified immunity. We would argue that Riley made a good faith mistake regarding the fog line and acted within his discretion. But David K. Reynolds isn't just alleging a mistake. He's alleging a targeted malicious deprivation of rights. And unfortunately, discovery has already yielded a massive fatal twist. Hawthorne leaned forward. What twist? Mr. Reynolds subpoenaed Riley's personal cell phone records, Jenkins explained, her voice devoid of hope. It turns out Riley wasn't just aggressively patrolling. He was playing a game. Jenkins opened the file and slid a printed transcript of text messages across the desk. These texts were sent between Officer Riley and Officer David Kincaid, another rookie on the midnight shift, exactly 4 minutes before Riley pulled over Judge Hargrove. Hawthorne picked up the transcript. His eyes scanned the highlighted lines. Riley, 11:38 p.m., dead night, nothing but minivans. Kincaid, 11:39 p.m. I'm at 2 points. You got 0. Better find something shiny. Riley, 11:41 p.m. Bingo. Navy Benz E-Class just drove past. Driver fits the profile, taking him down, going for a 5-pointer. Hawthorne felt physically sick. He dropped the paper. They had a point system, Jenkins explained grimly. An informal, highly illegal game among a few rookies. Points for pulling over luxury cars late at night. Points for the demographic of the driver. Points for getting them to submit to vehicle searches. Riley targeted Judge Hargrove specifically because he was a black man driving a high-end Mercedes in Lake Forest late at night. It wasn't a traffic stop. It was a trophy hunt. The room fell dead silent. The golden shield of qualified immunity was completely shattered. There was no good faith mistake. It was a premeditated, racially motivated constitutional violation documented in black and white. So what you're telling me, Mayor Whitman said, his voice trembling, is that we have a racist rogue cop, a tortured federal judge, and written proof of a corrupt precinct game. What is our legal exposure, Amanda? If this goes to a jury, Mayor, Jenkins said flatly, 10 million minimum. The jury will want to punish the city. They will want to send a message to every police department in America. Settle it, Caldwell whispered, sinking into his leather chair. Give Reynolds whatever he wants. Just keep this out of a courtroom. 3 months later, the deposition room on the 42nd floor of a downtown Chicago law firm felt colder than a meat locker. The expansive floor-to-ceiling windows offered a sweeping and different view of a gray, overcast skyline, but the true storm was entirely contained within those 4 soundproofed walls. Officer Justin M. Riley, now suspended, isolated, and officially stripped of his police powers, sat rigidly at the long, polished mahogany table. He wore an ill-fitting, off-the-rack gray suit that seemed to swallow his shrinking frame. The intervening 90 days had ravaged him. He had lost 15 pounds. The arrogant, untouchable aura of the young, aggressive night shift cop had completely evaporated. In its place sat a terrified, hollow-eyed 24-year-old man staring down the barrel of absolute financial, professional, and social ruin. Directly across the table sat David K. Reynolds, a civil rights attorney whose reputation for dismantling corrupt police departments was legendary. Reynolds was meticulously arranging a stack of manila folders, his silence a calculated weapon. To Reynolds' left sat Judge Leonard P. Hargrove. The judge wore a simple, impeccably tailored navy suit. His demeanor was calm, analytical, and entirely merciless. He did not look at Riley with anger. He looked at him the way a scientist observes a particularly destructive, yet contained specimen. "Mr. Riley," Reynolds finally began, his voice smooth, resonant, but carrying the lethal edge of a surgical scalpel. "Let us revisit the evening of November 15th. You testified earlier in this deposition and wrote in your official sworn police report that you feared for your personal safety when Judge Hargrove exited his vehicle. This fear you claim is what prompted you to unholster your X-26 taser and aim it at his chest. Is that a correct summary of your statement?" Riley swallowed hard. He cast a desperate, fleeting glance at his union-provided defense attorney, who simply gave a grim, microscopic nod. "Yes, sir," Riley rasped, his throat bone dry. "That is correct." "You were afraid," Reynolds repeated slowly, letting the word hang in the frigid air. He picked up an 8x10 glossy photograph from the table and slid it across the mahogany surface. "Let the record reflect I am handing the deponent Exhibit C, Mr. Riley. On that night, you were 24 years old. You were in peak physical condition. You were armed with a loaded Glock 19 semi-automatic pistol, an X-26 taser, a canister of police-grade oleoresin capsicum spray, and a collapsible steel baton. You were wearing level 3 Kevlar body armor beneath your uniform. Judge Hargrove was 58 years old. He was wearing a wool suit. He was holding absolutely nothing. His hands were visible. He made no sudden movements, a fact corroborated by your own dashcam footage. What exactly terrified you so profoundly, Mr. Riley? Was it his compliance, or was it his dignity?" "Objection," the union attorney interjected, his voice lacking conviction. "Argumentative." "Noted for the record. You may answer the question, Mr. Riley," Reynolds said, not breaking eye contact. He was a large man," Riley stammered, his fingers trembling as he interlaced them on his lap. "He was questioning my commands. In my training, hesitation or verbal resistance is a pre-attack indicator. I had to establish command presence. He requested a field supervisor, as was his absolute constitutional right," Reynolds corrected sharply, his voice rising in volume. "He complied with your order to exit the vehicle in the freezing rain. You responded by kicking his right ankle. You wrenched his arms behind his back with such violent, excessive force that Judge Hargrove required 3 months of intensive physical therapy for a severe tear in his rotator cuff. Did maiming a compliant senior citizen make you feel safe, Mr. Riley, or did it just make you feel powerful?" Riley looked down at the table. He had no answer, but Reynolds was far from finished. "Let's move away from your physical cowardice and discuss your motivations," Reynolds said, opening a separate red-tabbed folder. "I want to talk about the game. Let the record reflect I am introducing Exhibit F, subpoenaed text message transcripts from the personal cellular device of Justin M. Riley." The color instantly drained from Riley's face. Beside him, Amanda Jenkins, the lead counsel for the city of Lake Forest, closed her eyes and silently prayed for a miracle she knew was not coming. Reynolds slid the paper across the desk. "Let's read this together, Mr. Riley." A text sent to Officer David Kincaid at 11:41 p.m., exactly 4 minutes before you activated your emergency lights. You wrote, "Bingo. Navy Benz E-Class just drove past. Driver fits the profile. Taking him down. Going for a 5-pointer. Tell me, Mr. Riley, did Judge Hargrove look like a 5-pointer to you?" Tears finally welled in Riley's eyes, spilling over onto his pale cheeks. He was utterly trapped. The golden shield of qualified immunity was dead and buried. He had nothing left to hide behind. "It was just a stupid thing we did," a joke on the night shift. We were just bored. I didn't know who he was. Judge Leonard P. Hargrove, who had sat in absolute silence for the first 3 hours of the deposition, finally leaned forward. When he spoke, his voice commanded the room with the terrifying gravity of a federal bench. "That, Mr. Riley, is the entire point," Hargrove stated, his voice chillingly calm. Riley flinched visibly. "You did not know who I was. You believed I was just an ordinary citizen, someone you could comfortably abuse, humiliate, and violate without the slightest fear of consequence. You operated under the delusion that your badge granted you supremacy over my humanity. You were confident that your authority superseded the United States Constitution. You were catastrophically wrong." By the end of the 4-hour session, Riley was legally and spiritually broken. During the first recess, Amanda Jenkins stepped out into the hallway and immediately dialed Mayor Gregory S. Whitman. "It's a massacre, Mayor," Jenkins whispered frantically into the phone. Riley just handed them the hammer. The text messages prove premeditated, racially motivated civil rights violations. "If we do not settle this case by nightfall, we are going to face a Department of Justice pattern or practice investigation, and the jury will award them $10 million without blinking." The ensuing settlement negotiations took exactly 48 hours of grueling backdoor diplomacy. Judge Hargrove had no desire to bankrupt the taxpayers of Lake Forest. His objective was institutional reconstruction. He and Reynolds presented a list of 3 non-negotiable demands to the Lake Forest City Council. First, the financial penalty, a historic $2.8 million payout. Judge Hargrove legally stipulated that after Reynolds' legal fees were paid, every single cent of his portion would be immediately placed into a specialized legal defense trust fund dedicated to representing impoverished victims of police brutality in the Northern District of Illinois. Second, the professional execution of Justin M. Riley. The Lake Forest Police Department was legally compelled to terminate Riley permanently and submit his entire disciplinary file to the Illinois Law Enforcement Training and Standards Board with a mandatory recommendation for immediate and permanent decertification. Riley would be blacklisted. He would never be legally permitted to wear a badge, carry a firearm, or work in any capacity within law enforcement anywhere in the United States for the rest of his natural life. Third, the implementation of the Hargrove Decree. The Lake Forest Police Department was bound by a federal consent decree to fundamentally overhaul its operations. This included a total prohibition on pretextual traffic stops based on minor infractions, mandatory annual constitutional law seminars taught by independent civil rights attorneys, and the creation of a civilian oversight board armed with independent subpoena power. Terrified of a public trial, the city signed the agreement. Exactly 6 months after the harrowing incident on Illinois Route 22, Judge Leonard P. Hargrove returned to his chambers, slipped his arms into his long, flowing black robe, walked into his federal courtroom, and took his elevated seat upon the bench. The heavy wooden gavel rested securely under his right hand. He had stared into the darkest, most corrupt corner of the justice system on the shoulder of that rainy highway. But he had leveraged the immense power of that very same system to drag it into the light. Miles away, on the bleak industrial outskirts of the county, Justin M. Riley clocked in for the graveyard shift. He wore a high-visibility orange safety vest, his hands calloused and wrapped in thick leather work gloves. He spent 10 grueling hours a night hauling heavy wooden pallets and loading cardboard boxes into the backs of freight trucks for a regional logistics company. He earned $14.50 an hour. There was no Ford Interceptor. There were no flashing red and blue lights. There was no badge to hide behind. When his shift supervisor yelled at him for moving too slowly, Riley simply lowered his head, swallowed his pride, mumbled, "Yes, sir," and kept lifting. He had learned the hardest, most uncompromising lesson a man could ever learn. True, lasting authority does not emanate from a uniform or a gun. It emanates solely from the law. And when a man breaks the law to feed his own ego, the law will inevitably rise up, balance the scales, and crush him. This shocking case proves that nobody is above the law, especially those sworn to enforce it. When unchecked arrogance clashed with absolute constitutional authority, a $2.8 million lesson was delivered, permanently changing a police department and ending a corrupted career. What would you have done in Judge Hargrove's shoes on that rainy Illinois highway? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you found this true story of justice and accountability as gripping as we did, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more incredible true stories.